Hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming by. Today we're going to take a look at rugby. More specifically, we're going to take a look at a video titled Why Tiny New Zealand Dominates Rugby from a YouTube channel called Search Party. Now, I think I mentioned in an earlier video on this channel that I did on rugby that before I started this channel, I had never actually seen rugby played. I always knew there was a game called rugby somewhere in the world, but it being in the U.S., you never came across it. But in spite of that, I always knew of two teams, Springboks and All Blacks. I always knew there were two rugby teams that with those names, South Africa and New Zealand. And I think probably because over the course of my life, I read articles about like top 10 most dominant teams in the world or best sports organizations in the world. And I would imagine that's where I, would see those two names come up. So the All Blacks and the Springboks, and New Zealand, I know, is the All Blacks. So though I'm not familiar with the game, except for what I've done on this channel, I do know those teams. And so let's take a look. If you like the video, if you like the channel, please subscribe, like and comment, and all those things would be great. So let's get to it. Why tiny New Zealand dominates rugby.
In September 2023, these 20 countries will participate in the biggest tournament of one of the world's most popular sports, rugby. And you could make a strong argument that one of these 5 teams will win it. England invented the sport and has reached the World Cup finals 4 times. South Africa won the last World Cup in 2019. Ireland is currently ranked number 1 in the world, and France is hosting the tournament. Then there's New Zealand, who might win because, well, they're the most dominant team in the history of rugby, and arguably in all of sports history.
And the All Blacks are the world champions for the second time.
Since 1903, the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team has only lost to 7 countries, but has a comfortable winning record against all of them. That's all the more impressive when you take into account that New Zealand today only has a population of 5 million people, a fraction of the other countries.
5 million people in the country. I'm in Los Angeles, and the population of LA is, I think, a little over 4 million. And if you look at what they call the greater Los Angeles area, it's like 20 million. So 5 million that puts it in perspective.
That have made a World Cup final.
Very unique, obviously, for us to dominate the world because we are a very small part of it.
There is a fervent following of this team, almost religious at times.
So it begs the question, how did such a tiny country create such a dominant sports team? And can the New Zealand All Blacks stay on top?
Rugby combines the less placid features of American football and English soccer. You can run, pass, or kick the ball, while at the same time protecting yourself from the combined assault of the enemy.
Rugby is a fast, violent, and chaotic sport with many rules, but one basic premise: get the ball to your opponent's end of the field. The modern form of the game was invented at a school in Rugby, England, around 1820. At the time, England had a world-spanning empire, and it introduced rugby to its colonies, like South Africa and Australia in the 1860s, then New Zealand in the 1870s, where it became especially popular.
When rugby came to New Zealand, it came from origins in the UK where it was very much related to class structure. The elite schools played rugby in the UK.
Tony Johnson is a rugby expert, author, and TV broadcaster in New Zealand.
Welcome back, and Caleb Clark is in!
When it came to New Zealand, it really was the game for everyone. It didn't matter where you came from, what school you went to, you had a go at this game.
That included New Zealand's indigenous population, the Maori. They formed rugby teams almost immediately, and as early as the 1880s, a mostly Maori rugby team called the Natives played matches in other countries.
It was indeed a Maori person, Tom Ellison, who first came up with the idea of New Zealand wearing this black jersey.
Those jerseys are how New Zealand's national team came to be known as the All Blacks. And in 1905, they set off across the ocean to play matches, which, when played between countries, are called tests. The All Blacks.
Is that the definition of a test? Because I've encountered it in cricket and rugby. Test matches. Can there be a test match that isn't between countries, or is that what a test match is?
surprised everyone by playing a faster, more expansive, and far more organized style of rugby than had ever been seen before. They played 35 tests, and they only lost once. A success that not only changed rugby, but also how the world saw New Zealand.
New Zealand was starting to search for its own identity. This was the start of it. This was New Zealand, not so much a British subject anymore, but our own people.
After the tour, the All Blacks embodied that new national identity by fusing rugby with New Zealand culture, most famously by performing a Maori war dance called the haka before every test.
I think initially the haka was a greeting, and so a challenge, often performed before a battle. Some people feel that the haka gives the All Blacks an unfair advantage. It's psychological.
In 1924, this All Blacks team won all 32 tests on an overseas tour.
I just want to say, I don't know enough about it, and I don't want to say much about it because I don't know the history. But with cricket and rugby, it sure seems that, I don't know the details, but the British, I don't know how many hundreds of years it was, but the British, owning or having some sort of influence on so many different countries really spread those two sports, it seems, cricket and rugby. Like I said, I don't know the history in any detail, but it sure seems that was key for these sports to be introduced to these countries.
Earning them the nickname the Invincibles. They raised New Zealand's expectations for the All Blacks from simply winning to dominating world rugby.
The superlative All Blacks rugby machine. They once more confirmed their absolute supremacy. World champion. The New Zealand war machine, all set to join the other nations who've fallen before the invincible All Blacks.
According to data gathered by ESPN, between 1900 and 1989, the All Blacks won 71% of their tests. In 1987, they won the first ever Rugby World Cup. Then from 1990 to 2009, the All Blacks achieved a staggering 80% win rate. When they did lose, they always turned things around by developing new strategies.
We're not the biggest people in the world. The South Africans produced these giants. England, a very sort of gym-trained muscularity about them. But what we do have is a combination of athleticism, skill, but also be willing to try something just a little bit out of the ordinary.
More than 100 years after.
He said South Africa has the biggest guys. England has the gym-trained strong guys. And New Zealand has sort of the athletic guys and willing to innovate the game. I don't know if that's actually literally true, but it's fascinating if that's the perception or if that's how it is. I never really thought of that.
After started playing rugby, this small country of a few million people was still producing the best rugby players in the world year after year. So how does New Zealand do it?
It's the fact that it is our national game, so kids are playing it from when they're small, boys and girls.
Alice Soper is a rugby player and journalist.
You can be 6, so 5 or 6, and they play something called Ripper Rugby, which is like a primer to the tackle, where they have flags on their shorts.
Ripper Rugby teaches kids how to run, pass, and catch, and it's how New Zealand maximizes the number of people who try rugby.
For what it's worth, that's what we did, in the U.S. playing American football with the flags also. And, then you graduate to the actual tackling fairly young, but when you're starting, we did the flags.
Thereby maximizing the pool of talent, entering a pipeline that feeds the All Blacks. By the time kids turn 13, they're playing tackle rugby and join club and school teams. Many high schools, called colleges in New Zealand, field multiple teams, again, to keep as many playing as possible. But the best boys play on their school's top team, where the best of the best are increasingly identified as potential future All Blacks.
You could almost liken it to college sport in the United States.
You're watching Land Rover First 15 Rugby, where we show you the stars of tomorrow today.
Then after graduating, the best are hired by teams to play in New Zealand's professional rugby league, Super Rugby. Only professional players that play in New Zealand are eligible to reach the top level.
I did not know there was a New Zealand professional rugby league. That's interesting.
the All Blacks. It's a way for the
and
team to
the
ensure
best
that
of
there
those
is a
go.
constant stream of new players that learn the game the New Zealand way.
They have to be all things. So they've got to be able to kick, they've got to be able to run, they've got to be able to tackle.
There's an expectation that they will play rugby the way the New Zealand public expect to see them play, which is this rather flamboyant style.
Behind the back pass. I haven't watched enough like full games yet to like really pick up on a specific style, but New Zealand, he said, have a flamboyant style, so they must be fun to watch. I'll look for that from now on.
Possibly the greatest generation of All Blacks ever played from about 2010 to 2016. Over that time span, they won 90% of their tests and never lost at home. Plus, they won 2 more World Cup championships. Several players on the 2015 team played at the same schools, and they all played for one of 5 Super Rugby teams.
Probably the most well-known would be Richie McCaw. He was your typical kind of like hard man, absolutely no fear going into the contact.
Daniel Carter, for example, who was like the Joe Montana of the All Blacks. He was a brilliant player, but he was a great strategist as well.
But while the top of the pipeline gets all the glory, New Zealand's real advantage over its much bigger rivals is at the bottom.
Other countries may have a similar kind of narrow trajectory through your schoolboys into your academies. They just don't have as many people funneling in at that beginning point.
It's quite...
So it seems maybe, I don't know if it still is this way, but it seems like maybe in New Zealand, with such a small population having such an impact, maybe like was pretty much every kid, every child's playing rugby first, and they would move on, and only when they didn't move on anymore, maybe were they sort of steered into a different sport. I don't know, because in LA there's 4 million people, and there's lots of kids, and some choose baseball, some choose basketball, some choose football, and focus on that. But if you had every kid focusing on rugby, and that was the number one priority, then that would be, you'd have a bigger, larger group to put through that funnel. So I wonder if that's the way it is, kind of. You're rugby first, and any other sport after.
A rugged sort of a game that suited the early pioneers of New Zealand, and these days it provides opportunity now. Young people coming out of perhaps some of the more difficult socio-economic areas of New Zealand.
So the All Blacks dominate rugby because New Zealand transformed it into a game for everyone. But whether or not their domination continues is up for debate.
Huge World Cup upset. These men are too good for the All Blacks.
In 2019, the All Blacks failed to make the World Cup finals. Then in 21 and 22, they lost a stretch of 6 out of 8 tests, which pushed them to an all-time low ranking of 5th in the world. It led some to speculate that the All Blacks were in decline and question whether they could continue to dominate world rugby. Blame was placed on the COVID pandemic and the All Blacks coach Ian Foster. Most importantly, though, the losses forced New Zealanders to reflect on how their country's relationship with rugby is changing. A 2018 report found that the number of high school boys playing rugby was falling, while other sports were on the rise.
New Zealand has had phenomenal success in sports like rowing, basketball, but they've taken away athletes who once upon a time would have been All Blacks.
Like a lot of kind of male prevalent sports, they then start to take on that identity of like real heavily masculine spaces, which isn't necessarily what people want to be around. It's become out of step with younger New Zealanders.
And many worry that high school rugby is increasingly dominated by a few privileged schools that are making the game too professional at the expense of the rest. A 2013 investigation found that 5 schools in Auckland are estimated to have spent $400,000 on their rugby teams, while their competitors spent only $50,000. Over the next 5 years, the number of Auckland high school rugby teams fell from 225 to 181.
It's become very elitist, with the schools really focusing on the elite teams. What happens to all the players who aren't good enough to play for the first team?
Just a lot of pressure when you're 15. So we're starting to see people realize, oh, well, this isn't working out here. We need to be changing things.
The most immediate challenge keeping the All Blacks from total domination, though, is the rest of the world. The rivals are getting better, particularly France and Ireland. Additionally, professional rugby leagues in Europe and Asia are getting very popular, and they're attracting a lot of New Zealand's players, making them ineligible to play for the All Blacks.
And even the lure of that black jersey for some players simply isn't enough when they think they can set themselves up for life.
In England, you've got a couple
That's
of
interesting
TVs that are
right
over
there.
there. If you look at the European teams, same thing there. Japan, currently run by a New Zealander. We put our people everywhere, and then we're surprised when they start to know our tricks.
Are those are the coaches from New Zealand that are in other parts of the world, are they developing teams to be in that same sort of flamboyant style, the really athletic style? I would guess maybe that's like she said, sharing the secrets, you know?
While the loss of these players may hurt the All Blacks' ability to win tests, it does ensure that New Zealanders will continue to remain at the cutting edge of rugby well into the future.
Well, I wonder if a New Zealander would rather have the All Blacks dominant or just have influence. I think they probably want the All Blacks to be dominant still. You know, when I was like 15, 14 years old, I really liked a tennis player from New Zealand. And, you know, watching this, it makes me wonder, you know, how he developed. I don't know if tennis is big. His name was Chris Lewis. He was a pro tennis player, really cool, and really a lot of, you know, he was fun to watch, and I thought he was cool. He was only like 5 years older than me, but he got to the finals of Wimbledon, and I just remember he was from New Zealand. So I wonder if that's a sport, because even when this video mentioned other sports other than rugby, they didn't mention tennis. So I don't know if tennis is popular there or not. But anyway, Chris Lewis in the 70s and 80s, he was good, and he was fun to watch. That's interesting. I think I don't know when this video was made. I don't know if there's been if there's been some sort of decline ongoing since this video was made. But I mean, their most dominant team was in 2010 to 2016. That's not that long ago, so it's not exactly like it's you know, there's no hope. I don't know what they're ranked now, but I'm sure it's very high. It's fascinating. You know, it's a country the size of Los Angeles, and yet they dominated this sport. I will definitely, now that I know more about rugby, I'll definitely keep an eye on the competitions and find out. Hopefully New Zealand will continue, because the All Blacks, you know, like I said, I knew the name. I knew the name All Blacks, and it sounded so cool, because there used to be a team in American football called the Oakland Raiders, and their uniforms were black, and it was just it carried a little bit of intimidation factor, you know. That was before the NFL required every team to look exactly the same, and they took out any individual characters from teams. But back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, the Oakland Raiders and then Los Angeles Raiders were the black and silver, and it's kind of, the black uniform is cool. But it's an interesting video. It's an interesting story, and I hope you liked it. And if you liked it, please subscribe, and talk to you later. Thanks.